Okay, so in this question we were given a chart that compared real GDP and real GDP per capita from 2000 to 2013, and we had to use the data given in the chart to assess the validity of the following statements. The first statement was that real GDP in 2013 was £25,000 million. So we're focusing on real GDP, which is the blue line, and we're also only want to focus on the year of 2013, so we only want to consider the data point for the blue line in this green shaded region. Now we can draw a line at that data point across to the axis in order to read off the value at that point. Now you can see that if we look at the right hand side of the axis, we actually get a value that is 25,000. But that is the wrong axis when interpreting real GDP figures. Because we're looking in this chart at two different data series that have two different magnitudes of units, real GDP and real GDP per capita, we have to use two different y-axes. For real GDP per capita, you can see the numbers are in thousands, but for real GDP, the numbers are in thousands and sometimes millions of millions, because real GDP is a much bigger value than real GDP per capita. So therefore, in order to get the correct interpretation, we have to make sure we're reading off the correct axis. Now, if we're looking at real GDP, we need to be looking at the left axis, which you can see is no way near 25,000 million. It's actually in between 1,400,000 million pounds and 1,600,000 million pounds. So as a result, if we were to read off 25,000 million pounds, it's because we're actually using the wrong axis. We'd be using the real GDP per capita axis. So therefore, this is an incorrect statement. Second statement was real GDP per capita was slightly in excess of 600,000 million pounds in 2000. Well, because we're considering real GDP per capita, we want to consider the green line, and we're only interested in the year 2000, so we can highlight that particular region we're interested in. Again, we're going to draw a red dotted line to illustrate the point of real GDP per capita during 2000, but again, we have to be careful to make sure we interpret the right axis. If we interpret the real GDP in terms of millions axis, the statement actually is correct. However, if we actually use the correct axis, which is the real GDP per capita axis, we get a number that's no way near 600,000 million pounds. So therefore, this is an incorrect statement if we use the wrong axis. So therefore, because in this particular situation we would be using the wrong axis, this statement is false. The next statement is that real GDP per capita has experienced greater variability over the period. Well, it is impossible to be able to compare the two data series in terms of variability because, of course, the two data items are scaled differently. They have been adjusted in order to ensure there can be a comparison between the two in terms of their values in those given years, but we can't actually compare the variability because on one side we're looking at real GDP, which is in millions, and on the other side we're looking at real GDP per capita. So the option that refers to variability is wrong because we're using scale adjustments, we can't determine variability. So therefore this is an incorrect statement. And finally, real GDP per capita was slightly under £24,000 in 2013. Well, because we're looking at real GDP per capita, we're interested in the green line, and in 2013 we're interested in this green shaded region here. If we draw a line at the data point in 2013 for real GDP per capita, and we read off the correct y-axis, which is the right-hand side, we can see we get a value that is just below £24,000, which is exactly what the statement tells us. So therefore, the data in the chart seems to back up the statement, and therefore this is the true and correct statement.